Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide. Today we're diving deep into a case that's chilling, truly sensational, and frankly wrapped in layers of manipulation. It's a 19th century New York mystery.
That's right. We're talking about the unsolved death of Mary Rogers, who most people know as the beautiful cigar girl.
Her death in 1841 wasn't just a shock to the city. It genuinely changed things. American law, ideas about morality. It even sparked, well, basically the first true crime analysis in fiction.
Edgar Allan Poe's The Mystery of Marie Roget, a pioneering work.
Absolutely. So our mission today, we want to try and cut through all that sensationalism, and the fiction, even Plunder's brilliant attempt.
We need to go beyond Poe. We'll look at the actual historical records, the eyewitness accounts, which really conflict with each other, and eventually the shocking confession that came out later.
What we're trying to understand and hopefully help you understand is how this one young woman's death became this sort of mirror.
Yeah, a mirror reflecting New York City's biggest fears at the time. Anxieties about, well, lawlessness, the city growing so fast, something really crucial, the changing place of women in the 1840s.
We've got pieces of the historical record, those newspaper accounts, many deliberately skewed or even fictionalized by Poe for his story, and thankfully some modern analysis to help make sense of it.
So get ready, we need to unpack what is truly a phantom homicide, a case that feels like it was almost designed, maybe by fate, maybe by fear, to stay hauntingly unresolved.
Okay, so to really feel the weight of this mystery, you first need to grasp who Mary Rogers was in public life. She wasn't just some anonymous victim.
No, not at all. She was, essentially a minor celebrity, a real fixture on Broadway, the busiest street in New York.
An icon of Broadway, you could say. Mary Rogers, born around 1820, she worked at John Anderson's cigar store. Big place, right near City Hall.
And that location was key. You see, shop owners back then, in the 1830s, 40s, they'd figured something out. A powerful marketing trick. Hire the most beautiful young women they could find, the cigar girls, to work the counters. They were sort of the original public-facing female employees. And they drew in crowds, specifically this new class of educated, ambitious men about town.
And Mary Rogers was apparently the star attraction.
Oh, definitely. Her looks were talked about constantly in the press. James Gordon Bennett's New York Herald especially. They treated her almost like royalty, publishing these flowery, almost romantic descriptions.
Wow. So she got serious attention.
Yeah.
Not just from regular customers.
From big names, too. Literary figures like Washington Irving, even Edgar Allan Poe himself supposedly visited the store. She really represented both the allure, the opportunity, but also the perceived danger for women finding economic independence in this booming industrial city.
That celebrity angle is so important because it means she was already linked to scandal before she died. Which brings us to this, well, frankly, bizarre prequel to the main event.
The first disappearance in 1838.
Yeah. 3 years before the murder, Mary just vanishes. She leaves behind what her mother, Phoebe Rogers, called an affectionate and final farewell. Basically, a suspected suicide note.
The city went wild, huge scandal.
But then, she just reappears, almost as quickly.
Right, and there's some confusion in the historical sources about how long she was gone. Was it just a few hours? Or maybe even a month?
The official story was pretty tame, just an unannounced visit to a friend out in Brooklyn.
But nobody really bought it. Come on. This first vanishing act, it immediately kicked off two main theories swirling around the public.
Okay, what were they?
First, that it was all a publicity stunt, cooked up by Anderson, her boss, to sell more cigars. Plausible, maybe.
And the second?
That it was an elopement. She'd run off with someone.
James Gordon Bennett, the newspaper guy, he later claimed it was definitely an elopement, maybe with a naval officer.
Yeah, he wrote about that looking back. So this whole incident, it basically set the stage. It trained the public, to see Mary Rogers' life through this lens of melodrama, secrets, potential scandal.
So when she disappeared for the final time, people were already primed. They were expecting some complex, headline-grabbing story.
Exactly. And her actual home life, well, that was already plenty complicated, even without the newspaper stirring things up.
She lived with her widowed mother, Phoebe, in a boarding house at 126 Nassau Street. And those boarding houses back then, they could be real pressure cookers, hotbeds of tension.
Absolutely. And the main tension seemed to revolve around Daniel Payne. He was her fiancé, a court cutter by trade, and he also boarded there.
And people didn't like him.
Two key people really didn't. Mary's mother, Phoebe, for one, and also her former suitor, a guy named Alfred Crommelin.
Ah, Cromwell. He comes up again later, right?
Yes, definitely. He was a law clerk, used to live there too. And he apparently made no secret of his dislike for Payne, said he had a drinking problem, a bad temper.
Okay, so we had this backdrop of tension. Now let's talk about her final movements, because they seem incredibly suggestive.
They really do. The day before she vanished for good, Saturday, July 24th, 1841, Mary was clearly up to something, trying to arrange some kind of secret financial deal.
How do we know?
She was desperately trying to contact Crommelin, the ex-suitor. She even left a rose in his keyhole, which sounds romantic, but it seems like it was masking this urgent need for money.
What kind of money?
She needed to exchange a boarder's IOU for $50 cash. Now, $50 back then, that's a huge amount, over $1,400 in today's money.
Wow. Where did she get the IOU and why did she need cash so urgently?
We don't know for sure who the boarder was, but the urgency is palpable. When Crommelin didn't turn up, maybe he was there, maybe he ignored it. She went to her old boss, Anderson, the cigar store owner, and he gave her the cash.
So let's recap. She suddenly has a large sum of money obtained under mysterious circumstances. She's trying to secretly contact a former flame. And then she tells her current fiancé she's just going to visit her aunt.
Exactly. It all points towards some kind of prearranged, clandestine meeting, something with serious stakes. And it happens just days before she's found dead. The conflicting stories, the mystery. It doesn't start with the body. It starts with that $50.
Okay, so that brings us to Sunday, July 25th, 1841, the day she disappeared.
Right. Mary tells Payne, her fiancé, she's off to visit her aunt, a Mrs. Downing, who lived uptown. Now, to get there from Nassau Street, she'd likely need to take the ferry across the Hudson, probably heading towards Hoboken initially.
And it was raining heavily that afternoon, wasn't it?
Yes, pouring down. So Payne didn't go to meet her later as planned. He just figured, with the weather, she decided to stay overnight at her aunt's.
Seems reasonable, but tragically wrong.
Tragically wrong. By Monday morning, the alarm goes up. They realize she never actually made it to her aunt's house. The search begins immediately.
And there's a crucial sighting, right? The last confirmed sighting in the city.
Yes. Someone saw Mary walking towards the Hoboken ferry landing. And she wasn't alone. She was with a companion described only as a tall, dark man.
So that confirms her destination, or at least her intended path, across the river to the Jersey side, towards those pleasure grounds.
Exactly. Then, 3 agonizing days later, on Wednesday, July 28th, the search comes to a horrifying end.
Her body is found.
Yes. Floating in the shallow water near the Jersey shore, specifically Weehawken, near the Elysian Fields.
And the Elysian Fields. It was a known spot, wasn't it? A sort of pleasure resort.
It was. But it also had a reputation. Even back then, it was known for attracting, let's say, a rougher crowd. City blackguards, as the papers called them.
The body was in bad shape, bruised, waterlogged.
Very bad shape. But here's where it gets immediately suspicious. Who identifies the body?
Alfred Crommelin, the former suitor, the one she tried to get money from.
Bingo! He just happened to be searching over in Hoboken that very day, and somehow he goes almost directly to where the body was found.
That seems incredibly coincidental.
Or not coincidental at all. His immediate, almost sort of prophetic appearance right there at the discovery, it instantly raised flags, both officially and with the public. What did he know? Did he know where she was going? Had he followed her? The questions started immediately.
Let's get into the forensic details, because this is where that popular narrative, the idea of a simple gang rape and murder, it really starts to unravel when you look closely.
It does. The medical testimony was absolutely clear. Mary had suffered brutal violence. But, and this is such a 19th century thing,
What?
even while describing horrific injuries, the doctors felt this need to testify about her virtuous character.
That's a strange contradiction. Trying to preserve the myth of the innocent victim, even amidst the grim reality.
Precisely. It's quite profound, isn't it? But the details they did record are chilling and crucial. They found a piece of lace tied incredibly tightly around her neck. So tight, in fact, it was actually hidden in the folds of her swollen flesh.
So strangulation was the likely cause of death.
Sufficient to cause death, yes. That was one finding. Also, her arms were rigid, classic rigor mortis had set in, and her wrists showed these very distinct circular marks, excoriations, rope burns, basically, indicating she'd been bound.
But it's the clothing that tells a stranger's story, right?
Right.
It suggests something more deliberate than just random violence.
Exactly. Her outer dress was torn, okay, but then a slip about a foot wide, they measured, had been ripped off her, wound 3 times around her waist, and then secured. secured with what the medical examiner specifically described as a hitch.
A hitch, not just a knot.
No, not like a knot you'd tie your clothes with. A hitch is functional. It's used for securing something, for pulling, or crucially for carrying a heavy object.
So the doctors thought.
They concluded it was basically engineered as a handle. A gruesome makeshift way for possibly a single person to lift and carry a heavy dead weight.
That's incredibly specific and disturbing.
Yeah.
What else?
The way the neck bindings were layered is also very specific. An inner muslin slip about 18 inches wide was described as being torn out evenly and with great care, not just ripped haphazardly.
Okay.
This carefully torn piece was then tied loosely around her neck. But here's the key. It was tied over the piece of lace that likely killed her and under the strings of her bonnet and secured with a hard knot.
And the knot on the bonnet strings, that was significant too, wasn't it?
Hugely significant. The examiner identified it definitively. It was a slip or sailor's knot.
A sailor's knot, not just any knot.
Right. This points to someone with a very specific, specialized skill set, not your average street thug. These details, taken together, the careful tearing, the carrying hitch, the sailor's knot, they suggest a specific individual, someone with specific knowledge, acting methodically, even in the midst of violence, trying to conceal the crime.
And compounding all this confusion, the authorities buried her very quickly.
Almost immediately. They cited the intense summer heat and the state of the body. But this haste, it prevented any real scrutiny by the public or the press at first.
Which led to outrage.
Massive outrage, particularly from newspapers like the Sunday Mercury. They basically forced the authorities to exhume the body later for a re-examination. But the damage was done. It left this lingering impression that officials were trying to bury the truth along with Mary Rogers.
Okay, so with the body found and quickly buried, the focus shifts across the river to Weehawken, to the supposed crime scene.
Yes. And the key witness shaping that initial narrative was Frederica Loss. She ran the tavern near the Elysian Fields, the place often called the Barrière du Roule in Poe's story and some accounts.
And her testimony was problematic.
Deeply problematic, inconsistent from the start, which really should have rung alarm bells louder than it did. Initially, she apparently offered very little useful information.
But then her story changed.
Dramatically. Later, she came forward with this narrative that perfectly fed the public's frenzy, the gang theory.
What did she claim?
She claimed Mary and that same tall, well-dressed man of dark complexion had visited her tavern around 3 p.m. on that Sunday. They then left, heading towards the woods nearby. Then, Loss claimed, shortly after dark, this gang of rough-looking men, miscreants, showed up. They drank heavily, were loud and boisterous, and then they fled in the same direction Mary had gone.
And then?
Almost immediately after the gang disappeared into the woods, Loss said she heard brief, violent screams. Female screams.
Wow, that paints a vivid picture. The innocent girl, her mysterious escort, ambushed by villains in a public park.
Exactly. It fit perfectly with the city's fears. And it seemed corroborated, too. An omnibus driver named Valence later testified he had seen Mary crossing the ferry with the dark-complexioned man, which seemed to lock down the timeline.
So suspicion naturally fell on people close to Mary.
Oh, absolutely. The usual suspects got dragged through the mud, as you'd expect. Daniel Payne, the fiancé, was grilled intensely.
But he had an alibi.
Eventually, yes. He provided affidavits for his whereabouts that seemed to satisfy the police, though apparently he struggled initially to account for all his time that Sunday, which kept suspicions simmering around him.
And Alfred Crommelin, the ex-suitor who found the body.
Highly suspicious, naturally. Especially after that whole incident with the rose she left for him, and someone maybe writing Marie on a slate. It suggested ongoing romantic interest, maybe obsession.
But Poe didn't think he did it.
No, Poe's analysis, through Dupin, kind of reframed Crommelin, saw him more as a romantic busybody, heartbroken, maybe inserting himself into the drama, but not a cold-blooded killer.
What about Anderson, the old boss, the one who gave her the $50?
Also suspected. There were rumors he'd made unwelcome advances. Maybe he felt guilty about giving her the money for whatever fatal rendezvous she was heading to, but he was publicly cleared fairly quickly.
So despite these individuals being looked at, the public really latched onto the gang theory.
They did, and that consensus was absolutely cemented by a discovery made a whole month later in September.
What was found?
Pieces of Mary's clothing, including her handkerchief, crucially marked with her initials, MR. They were found scattered in a dense thicket quite near Frederica Loss's tavern.
Near the supposed crime scene.
Precisely. The newspapers basically declared the case closed. Victory. They ran headlines triumphantly reporting that the items were heavily mildewed, grass had grown through them, proving, they claimed, that the clothes had been lying there undisturbed for 3 or 4 weeks since the murder.
This seemed like irrefutable proof. The clothes were found where the screams were heard. Case closed.
It seemed like it, but this is exactly where Poe, or rather his detective Dupin, steps in and starts meticulously shredding that popular narrative.
He questioned the location.
He questioned the logic. The area around Weehawken and the Elysian Fields wasn't some remote, untouched wilderness. It was a hugely popular spot for New Yorkers on a Sunday afternoon. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people would have been strolling around there.
So Dupin's point was,
How on earth could these items, a handkerchief, pieces of a white petticoat, maybe a parasol, lie hidden in plain sight in a busy public area for 20 days or more without anyone stumbling upon them? He called it miraculous, which was Poe's polite way of saying impossible.
he also questioned the physical evidence itself, the mildew in the grass.
Yes, he attacked the so-called scientific proof the newspapers were crowing about. Let's think about mildew.
Okay.
Mildew is a fungus. Under the right conditions, warm, damp, like a New Jersey summer, it appears very quickly, often within a day. And it decays just as quickly. It doesn't slowly build up over weeks.
And the grass.
Same logic. Dupin pointed out that grass, especially in peak summer growing season, can shoot up several inches in just a few hours, let alone a day or two. The idea that the grass growth proved the items had been there for 3 or 4 weeks. It was scientifically weak, to put it mildly.
So what was Poe suggesting?
He strongly implied the scene was staged, or at the very least that the items were planted there much later than the murder itself, perhaps by someone wanting to reinforce the gang theory or desperately trying to cover up, well, something else entirely. The timing just didn't add up. The condition of the items was far more consistent with being dumped there shortly before they were found, not weeks earlier.
This really gets us to the intellectual core of the whole thing, doesn't it? Edgar Allan Poe, sitting miles away in Philadelphia, obsessed with logic, with detail.
Yeah, and he's using nothing but those sensational, confusing, often contradictory newspaper reports, the very things fueling the public delusion, to try and solve a real crime.
He called it ratiocination. Pure analytical reasoning applied to this real-life horror show.
And his main criticism of the New York police, the authorities, it was profound. He basically said they failed because they got stuck on what seemed plausible. They assumed, okay, gang attack happens all the time.
Whereas Dupin, Poe's detective, argued.
That true investigation has to focus on the unique elements, the things that don't fit the standard pattern, the anomalies, the outre details, as he called them, in the Rue Morgue story, because that's where the truth hides.
So where did he start dismantling the official narrative?
He first went after the newspaper arguments about the body itself. Remember how it was found floating after only 3 days?
Yeah, and one paper, L'Etoile I think it was, claimed that was impossible.
Yeah.
Said bodies take 6 to 10 days to decompose enough to float.
Right. Dupin just demolished that with basic physics, specific gravity.
Explain that again.
He pointed out that a human body generally only sinks if water is forced into the lungs and stomach. That happens when someone is alive, struggling, actively drowning.
But if someone is killed first, on land, and then put in the water,
then there's no struggle, no gasping, no water forced inside. In that case, the body's natural specific gravity is often lighter than water. It might not sink at all.
especially, Dupin noted, for a woman's body, which tends to have more buoyant fatty tissue.
Exactly. So finding Mary's body floating after just 3 days, it was perfectly consistent with her being murdered on land first and then disposed of in the river. The newspaper's whole sensational claim that it couldn't be her body, just based on flawed science, bad understanding.
Okay, so he cleared up the confusion about the body. But the really crucial part of his analysis, the part we really need to dig into, is how he completely discredited the gang theory.
Yes. He argued, very persuasively, that the physical evidence found at that thicket scene didn't point to a gang at all. It pointed, overwhelmingly, to a single murderer.
Okay, let's break down his points. His logical pillars for a lone killer. What was the first one?
The nature of the struggle. Remember the reports. The scene suggested a violent, protracted, enduring struggle.
Right.
Dupin asks the simple question, why? Why would a gang of 3 or 4 strong men, errant blackguards, struggle for any length of time with one relatively small young woman? They would have overpowered her instantly.
So a long fight suggests.
It suggests as a more evenly matched confrontation. One attacker, one victim, engaged in a desperate, perhaps prolonged physical fight.
Makes sense. What was pillar number 2?
The abandoned evidence. Specifically, that handkerchief with her initials, MR. Why was it left behind?
Good question. Carelessness.
Dupin argued against that for a gang. A group, acting with bravado, would either make sure they got everything, or someone else in the group would notice the oversight and grab it. But a lone murderer...
What about them?
Imagine the psychology. You've just committed this horrific act. You suddenly realize you've left behind a damning piece of evidence, clearly identifying the victim. What hits you? Intense, paralyzing terror.
You just want to get away.
Immediately. Your only thought is escape. You are mentally incapable, Dupin argued, of forcing yourself to go back to that accursed shore to retrieve a piece of cloth. Leaving the handkerchief wasn't gang carelessness. It was the accident of an individual paralyzed by fear, proof of a single panicked killer.
Chilling logic. Okay, point 3.
This links back to those specific forensic details we discussed earlier, the method of transport. Remember that torn slip wound 3 times around her waist, secured with a hitch?
The makeshift handle.
Exactly. Dupin points out that's a device for one person to carry or drag a heavy dead weight. If you have 3 or 4 men, you don't mess around with tearing slips and tying hitches. You just grab the arms and legs and carry the body. Simple.
And this method, the single-person carry, explained other evidence too, right? The drag marks, the fence.
Perfectly. This carrying method likely forced the lone killer to drag the body for at least part of the way, which explains the drag marks found on the ground. And it explains why fence rails were taken down between the thicket and the riverbank.
How so?
A gang would just lift the corpse easily over the fence. But a single person, burdened, struggling with the weight, might need to convert the carry into a drag, and to do that easily, they'd have to remove the fence rails to clear a path. Every single piece of physical evidence, when you looked at it logically, screamed, lone killer, not gang.
Okay, that's compelling. Did Dupin have a final proof against the gang theory?
He did, and it was perhaps the most psychologically astute point, the lack of betrayal.
Meaning?
Think about it. There was a huge reward offered for information, and a full pardon promised to any accomplice who turned state's evidence. Weeks went by, months went by, and nobody talked.
If it was a gang of 3 or 4 guys...
Someone would have cracked. Fear of betrayal, greed for the reward. The secret wouldn't have held. The fact that it did hold, Dupin argued, was the very best of proof that it is, in fact, a secret. A secret known only to 1 or 2 living human beings and to God. A gang couldn't keep that secret under that pressure.
So if it was a solitary killer, who did Dupin think it was? Did he build a profile?
He did, meticulously. Not just some random thug, but likely a lover, or at least an intimate associate. Someone with a personal motive, not just random violence.
And the clues pointing to this person?
Several key things we've already touched on. The repeated description of the man seen with her as having a dark, swarthy complexion, that intricate hitch used for carrying, and maybe most damningly, that definitive sailor's knot used on her bonnet ribbon.
It all pointed towards a seaman.
Someone connected to the sea, yes. A sailor, or perhaps someone with naval experience. And Dupin reasoned, given that this man was seen publicly with a well-known figure like Mary Rogers, he was likely above the grade of the common sailor.
Which potentially circles back to that rumor about the first disappearance, the naval officer.
Exactly. Poe leaves that connection hanging, but it's strongly implied.
Did Dupin theorize how the body got into the river?
He did. He argued strongly she was thrown from a boat. He even tracked down reports of a small, rudderless boat found drifting near the shore the Monday after her disappearance. He believed this was the killer's getaway vessel.
Why a boat?
He suggested the peculiar marks found on Mary's back and shoulders were consistent with the pattern of the bottom ribs inside a small boat. And why wasn't the body weighed down to make it sink?
Good question.
Dupin's theory. The killer pushed off from the shore in the boat, only then realized he'd forgotten to attach a weight, but was too terrified by then to row back to the accursed shore to find one. Another sign of a single panicked individual.
Okay, so Poe, through Dupin, logically dismantles the gang theory. He paints this picture of a lone killer, probably a seaman, possibly her lover. But back in the real world, the actual police investigation gets completely derailed again by another tragedy.
Yes. Months after Mary's murder, on October 7th, 1841, her fiancé, Daniel Payne, meets his own terrible end.
He was in a bad way.
Utterly destroyed by all accounts, consumed by grief, maybe guilt, definitely psychologically broken. There are reports he claimed he was seeing Mary's ghost being haunted by her.
What happened to him?
He went on a massive drinking binge, ended up near Weehawken, right near the spot where Mary's body had been found, near Loss's Tavern. And he was found there, either dead or dying.
And the scene itself was dramatic.
Oh, perfectly staged for the newspapers. Found nearby him, specifically in that infamous thicket where the clothes were discovered, were his hat, his handkerchief, and an empty little bottle. A vial labeled laudanum.
Laudanum, opium tincture. And he left a note.
He did. It read, "To the world, here I am on the very spot. God forgive me for my misfortune and my misspent time."
Misfortune. The press must have gone crazy.
Instantly, they screamed, "Confession!" This was proof. He killed her in a jealous rage, or maybe his misfortune was his failure to protect her, leading to his guilt-ridden suicide.
But the official findings were different.
More ambiguous, yeah. The coroner's inquest actually found no trace of poison in his system, despite the laudanum vial. The official verdict was death by congestion of the brain, likely from exposure, heavy drinking, and general aberration of mind.
So was his misfortune admitting murder? Or just despair over his life falling apart after her death?
We'll never know for sure. His death added another layer of mystery, even as public opinion largely settled on blaming him.
But then the real bombshell drops. Over a year later, autumn 1842. It comes from the main witness herself.
Frederica Loss, the innkeeper, the one whose testimony started the whole gang theory.
What happened to her?
She was accidentally shot by her own son, and listen to this, it's chilling. Right after the shooting, her son was reportedly heard muttering something like, "The great secret will come out now."
The great secret. So Loss didn't die immediately.
No, she lingered for about 2 weeks, and during that time, apparently in a state of delirium, she confessed. She spoke to a justice of the peace.
And the confession was?
That Mary Rogers hadn't been murdered by a gang or even by a lover in the woods. She had died inside Loss's tavern during a botched, illegal abortion performed by a young physician.
An abortion. That changes everything.
Completely. And suddenly, all those strange details, the inconsistencies that Purr tried to explain through logic, they snap into place with a much simpler, darker explanation. Concealment.
So, Loss and her sons.
They were the ones who panicked after Mary died during the procedure. They were the ones who carried her body down to the river and disposed of it.
And the clothes. The ones found in the thicket a month later.
According to the confession, they initially sank the clothes in a nearby pond. But later, terrified by the constant police presence, the reward money, the scrutiny, they fished the clothes out and deliberately scattered them in a thicket.
To create a false trail. To reinforce the story she'd already told about the gang and the screams in the woods.
Exactly. To fabricate a crime scene far away from her tavern. To throw the police off the scent of the abortion.
Did this confession lead to convictions?
No. It was made while she was delirious, dying. While it seemed to explain so much, there wasn't enough concrete evidence left by then to charge her sons. But it was the closest thing to a real solution the public ever got.
It explained the delayed discovery of the clothes. The seemingly staged scene.
Everything. It was so compelling, in fact, that Poe himself felt he had to address it.
He revised his story.
He did. When The Mystery of Marie Roget was reprinted a few years later, in 1845, Poe added footnotes. Footnotes that directly acknowledged the possibility of an accident during an illegal operation. He essentially incorporated this dark, very human reality into his masterpiece of logical deduction.
Even with the abortion confession, though, questions linger. What about the tall, dark man seen with Mary?
Still ambiguous. Was he the semen lover who brought her there for the procedure? Was he the abortionist himself?
Poe considered both.
He acknowledged both possibilities. And there's one final loose thread. Another newspaper report from August 1841, shortly after Mary's death, mentioned an unidentified man's body found drowned near Barclay Street in Manhattan.
Described as?
Tall, swarthy, well-dressed, matching the description of Mary's companion.
So maybe he met his end too. Suicide. Accident. Foul play.
It offered this week, ultimately unresolved alternative theory. Maybe the dark man semen also ended up in the river? But like so much else in this case, it just remains a tragic, dangling question mark.
So whether Mary Rogers was murdered by a jilted lover, a sailor, or tragically died during a botched medical procedure, her death sent shockwaves through New York. And the impact wasn't just sensational headlines, it led to real, lasting changes.
Absolutely. This single death became this potent symbol, a real touchstone for the moral panic gripping the city in the mid-19th century.
What were the main anxieties?
A few big ones. A
Hmm.
growing sense of lawlessness, especially as the city expanded rapidly. Places like the Elysian Fields felt dangerous, poorly policed, and beneath that, this deep, simmering anxiety about sex, morality, and especially the changing role of women in society. Women like Mary working, having some independence that made people nervous.
And this panic translated into actual legislation.
Directly. Just 4 years later, 1845, two major laws were passed in New York, and the public outcry over the Mary Rogers case was a huge driving force behind both.
What were they?
First, the New York City Police Reform Act. It was a big step towards modernizing the city's police force,
Yep.
which at the time was pretty scattered and, frankly, ineffective.
And the second law?
This one was arguably even more impactful culturally, a New York state law that explicitly criminalized abortion.
So Mary's death became ammunition for moral reformers.
Powerful ammunition. Her tragic end was used constantly as a cautionary tale, giving reformers the political and moral leverage they needed to push for laws policing women's bodies, their choices, their behavior.
And then there's the literary legacy, which is huge.
Immense. Poe's The Mystery of Marie Roget. It really is groundbreaking. It wasn't just telling a story, it was an active intellectual exercise. The first time anyone tried to use detective fiction, pure logic ratiocination to solve a real ongoing crime, using only what was published in the papers. It was a stunning display, especially compared to how badly the police and press seemed to be handling it.
What's really fascinating, though, is how the media used Mary Rogers herself, especially once the abortion narrative started to leak out.
Yeah, that's crucial. From the start, she was immediately cast as the perfect victim, the pure, the innocent, beautiful cigar girl.
And that narrative required a villain.
Exactly. If she's pure, someone monstrous must be responsible. Initially, it was the faceless gang, but once the abortion story surfaced, the villain shifted. It became the sinister and usually female abortionist.
Only usually female.
That trope was incredibly common then. Figures like the infamous Madame Restel in New York, it played into deep misogynistic feels about women who operated outside traditional roles, women who held secret, unfeminine knowledge or power.
And this was used as a tool for social control.
Absolutely. The press, which was steeped in the pseudosciences of the day like physiognomy and phrenology,
Believing you could judge character from appearance or skull shape.
right. They would confidently report on later abortion cases, like a famous one involving an Elizabeth Dunham, saying the accused woman looked the part. She answers to the description, she looks the abortionist and the bad woman. It was a way to visually demonize these women.
So Mary Rogers becomes the angelic victim.
Corrupted by these dark external forces, these bad women. Her death ultimately was twisted and leveraged by reformers, by the press, to reinforce social norms, to punish women who transgressed, and fundamentally to control female autonomy in the 1840s. #outro.
So we've traced this incredible story, the sensational mystery of the beautiful cigar girl. We followed the police investigation, which was, let's be honest, frustratingly inadequate.
Yeah, completely bogged down by assumption and bad leads.
Then we dissected Poe's brilliant logical attempt to solve it from afar, his ratiocination.
And finally, we arrived at what seems likely to be the dark, very human truth suggested by that deathbed confession.
A tragedy probably rooted not in sensational violence, but in societal constraints, fear, and moral policing. A likely medical accident, desperately, tragically concealed.
Right. The initial narrative was pure pulp mystery, but the reality was perhaps more mundane in its cause, yet somehow even more tragic in its implications about the pressures on women like Mary.
And yet, even with the confession, the story never felt fully closed, did it? Those lingering questions. Who was the dark-complexioned man? Was he the seaman? What about that rudderless boat? And Daniel Payne's ambiguous suicide.
Exactly. Those loose ends, those layers of speculation built up by the press and Poe ensured that Mary Rogers' story wouldn't just fade away. It became this archetype, didn't it? The great American unresolved mystery, constantly challenging us to pick apart fact from fiction, truth from sensationalism.
A true phantom homicide, haunting us even now.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussion, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.